Prince Alexander stood before the massive golden mirror in his private chambers, adjusting the ceremonial sash across his chest for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The deep blue fabric, embroidered with silver threads that caught the early sunlight streaming through the tall windows, seemed heavier than usual. Today was not just any day. Today his father, King Edmund of Valdoria, would officially pass the crown to him in a ceremony that would be watched by millions around the world. The 28-year-old prince had always known this day would come, but somehow it felt both too soon and long overdue. His reflection showed a man who had grown into his responsibilities over the years, yet his green eyes still held traces of the uncertainty he felt deep inside. The perfectly styled, dark hair, the strong jawline that mirrored his father's, and the confident posture he had been trained to maintain since childhood. All of it would be scrutinized by the cameras that would broadcast every moment of the coronation ceremony. "Your Highness," came a gentle voice from behind him. Margaret, his longtime personal secretary, appeared in the doorway with her tablet in hand. She had been with the royal family for over 15 years and had watched Alexander grow from a sometimes rebellious teenager into the composed man he was today. "The social media team wanted me to remind you that today's ceremony will be the most watched royal event in our country's history. The preliminary numbers show that over 2 billion people worldwide are expected to tune in." Alexander turned away from the mirror, a slight smile crossing his face. 2 billion people watching me try not to trip over my own feet while wearing this ancient crown that weighs more than a small child. Margaret laughed softly. "I have complete confidence in your coordination skills, sir. Though I must say, the early social media reactions to the official portraits released yesterday have been quite remarkable. The public response has been overwhelmingly positive." The prince raised an eyebrow. Social media had become an integral part of modern royal life, something his father had struggled to understand but Alexander had embraced as a way to connect with people directly. The official royal accounts had millions of followers, and every public appearance generated countless posts, comments, and reactions from people around the globe. "What kind of reactions?" he asked, genuinely curious. Margaret scrolled through her tablet. "Well, the hashtag Coronation Alexander has been trending worldwide since midnight. People are sharing their excitement about the ceremony, posting old photos of you from various royal events over the years, and many are commenting on how much you've grown into your role. There are some particularly touching posts from veterans' families, remembering your work with military charities." Alexander felt a warmth spread through his chest. His work with veterans had always been close to his heart, partly inspired by his own brief but meaningful service in the Royal Navy. He had spent countless hours visiting hospitals, attending memorial services, and working to improve mental health support for former service members. To know that people remembered and valued that work meant more to him than any formal recognition. "And," Margaret continued with a mischievous glint in her eye, "there's quite a lot of discussion about your appearance. It seems the people of Valdoria and beyond are very pleased with their future king's presentation." Before Alexander could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Enter," he called, and in walked his younger sister, Princess Isabella. At 25, she had inherited their mother's auburn hair and quick wit, along with their father's sense of duty. She was dressed in a stunning emerald gown that complemented her eyes, with a tiara that had belonged to their great-grandmother. "Brother," she said with a grin, "you clean up rather well. I just passed a group of staff members in the hallway, and I'm pretty sure I heard one of them say something about swoon-worthy royalty. The internet is going to lose its collective mind when they see you today." Alexander shook his head, but he was smiling. "Is that really what we're focusing on? My appearance? Shouldn't people be more concerned with whether I'll be a good king?" Isabella walked over and straightened his ceremonial collar, a gesture that reminded him of all the times she had helped him prepare for important events over the years. "Alex, you've been preparing to be a good king your entire life. You've traveled to every corner of Valdoria. You speak 4 languages fluently. You've worked with environmental groups, military organizations, and youth programs. You've shown compassion during natural disasters and strength during political challenges. The people already know you'll be a good king." She stepped back and looked at him seriously. "But there's nothing wrong with them also thinking their king is handsome. It makes them proud. It makes them feel connected to the royal family, and frankly, it makes our country look good on the world stage. You represent not just the crown, but the best of what Valdoria can be." Margaret nodded in agreement. "Princess Isabella is absolutely right, sir. The social media reactions aren't just about superficial appearance. They're about people seeing strength, dignity, and hope in their future king. When someone posts about how proud they are of their royal family, they're really saying they're proud of their country." Alexander considered this as he took one last look in the mirror. He had always been somewhat uncomfortable with personal attention, preferring to focus on the work rather than himself. But perhaps his sister and Margaret were right. Perhaps people's positive reactions weren't just about vanity, but about something deeper, a sense of national pride and optimism for the future. "The car will be ready in 20 minutes, Margaret announced, checking her schedule. "Your father is already at the cathedral, and Queen Mother Elena arrived an hour ago. The crowds along the route have been gathering since dawn." "How are the crowds?" Alexander asked, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. In the distance, he could see people already lining the streets that led to St. Sebastian's Cathedral, where the ceremony would take place. "Massive," Isabella replied, joining him at the window. "The police estimate that over 500,000 people will line the route today. And that's not counting the viewing parties in public squares, the gatherings at embassies around the world, and all the people watching from home. Social media is full of photos of families getting up early to claim good spots along the route." Margaret showed them her tablet screen, which displayed a live feed of social media posts. Photo after photo showed excited families, groups of friends, and individual well-wishers holding signs, wearing traditional Valdorian colors of blue and silver, and sharing their excitement about the historic day. "Look at this one," Isabella said, pointing to a post from a young mother. "She's brought her 3 children to see the coronation procession, and she wrote about how she wants them to remember this day for the rest of their lives. She says she believes you'll lead Valdoria into a bright future." Alexander felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but it was a good weight, the kind that reminded him why he had dedicated his life to public service. These weren't just abstract concepts of duty and tradition. These were real people with real hopes and dreams, trusting him to lead their country with wisdom and compassion. "Sir," Margaret said gently, "there's something else you should know. The early morning shows around the world have been covering the coronation, and the commentary has been remarkably positive. Royal correspondents from 12 different countries have praised everything from the ceremony planning to the modernizations you've implemented in royal protocols. Alexander had indeed worked hard over the past year to update various royal traditions while maintaining their essential meaning and dignity. He had insisted on a more diverse group of participants in the ceremony, had arranged for sign language interpretation for deaf viewers, and had worked with environmental groups to make the event as sustainable as possible. The sustainability initiatives in particular are getting a lot of attention, Margaret continued. People are sharing posts about the locally sourced flowers, the renewable energy powering the broadcast equipment, and the fact that you chose to have the Coronation Feast feature entirely organic. Locally grown food. It's trending under the hashtag Green Crown. Isabella beamed with pride. You see, people notice when their leaders care about the same things they do. Climate change, sustainability, social justice. These aren't just political issues to you, they're personal values, and it shows. A gentle chime from Margaret's tablet indicated it was time to begin the final preparations. "Your Highness, if you're ready, the ceremonial guard is prepared to escort you to the carriage." Alexander took a deep breath and nodded. As they prepared to leave his chambers, Isabella caught his arm. "Alex," she said quietly, "Mother would be so proud of you today." Their mother, Queen Sophia, had passed away 5 years earlier after a long illness. She had been beloved by the people of Valdoria for her warmth, her charitable work, and her ability to make everyone she met feel valued and heard. Alexander had inherited many of her qualities, though he sometimes doubted whether he could live up to her legacy. "She always said that being royal wasn't about being perfect," Isabella continued. "It was about being genuine, being kind, and always remembering that we serve the people, not the other way around. You embody all of that." Margaret's tablet buzzed with another notification. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the social media numbers are climbing rapidly. We're now seeing engagement rates that are unprecedented for any royal event. People aren't just watching, they're participating, sharing stories, posting photos, and expressing their feelings about what this day means to them." She showed them the screen, which displayed a real-time feed of posts from around the world. Messages of congratulations and support were pouring in from citizens of Valdoria and royal watchers from dozens of other countries. Photos of viewing parties showed people dressed in their finest clothes, many wearing traditional Valdorian blue and silver. "This is incredible," Alexander said, genuinely moved by the outpouring of support. "I knew people cared about the monarchy, but this level of engagement, it's beyond what I imagined." "Your Highness," Margaret said with a smile, "I think you underestimate how much hope you represent to people. In a world that often feels uncertain and divided, you represent stability, tradition, and positive change all at once. People see in you someone who respects the past while working toward a better future." As they made their way through the palace corridors toward the main entrance, where the ceremonial carriage waited, Alexander reflected on the morning's conversations. The weight of the crown he would soon wear was not just about gold and jewels. It was about the dreams and aspirations of millions of people who looked to the monarchy as a symbol of their country's best qualities. The corridor walls were lined with portraits of previous kings and queens of Valdoria, each of whom had faced their own challenges and opportunities. His father, King Edmund, had modernized many aspects of the monarchy and had been instrumental in Valdoria's transition to a more environmentally sustainable economy. His grandfather had led the country through a difficult economic period with dignity and wisdom. His great-grandmother had been a pioneer in women's rights and had used her position to advocate for social reform. Now it was Alexander's turn to add his chapter to this ongoing story, and the early reactions suggested that people were ready to support him in that endeavor. The massive wooden doors of the palace entrance stood open, revealing the ornate golden carriage that would carry him to the cathedral. The carriage, crafted over 200 years ago, had been meticulously maintained and was drawn by 6 magnificent white horses. Palace guards in their ceremonial uniforms stood at attention, and beyond them, Alexander could hear the distant sound of crowds cheering. "The people are ready for their king," Margaret said softly. Alexander straightened his shoulders, checked his ceremonial sash one final time, and stepped forward into the bright morning sunshine. The cheers from the crowds grew louder as he appeared, and camera flashes sparkled like stars even in the daylight. As he climbed into the carriage, Alexander caught a glimpse of his phone, which Margaret had handed to him for emergency purposes. The screen showed notification after notification, messages, social media alerts, and news updates all related to the coronation. For just a moment, he allowed himself to feel the excitement and energy that was building around this historic day. The carriage began to move, and as it passed through the palace gates onto the public streets of the capital city, Alexander was overwhelmed by the sight before him. Thousands upon thousands of people lined both sides of the street, waving flags, holding signs, and cheering with genuine enthusiasm. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. Elderly couples stood arm in arm with tears in their eyes, and young people held up phones to capture and share every moment. This was just the beginning of what would become one of the most memorable and widely celebrated coronations in Valdorian history, and the social media reactions were only the first indication of how deeply this day would resonate with people around the world. The ancient bells of St. Sebastian's Cathedral rang out across the capital city of Valdoria as Prince Alexander's carriage approached the magnificent stone building. The cathedral, built over 4 centuries ago, had witnessed the coronation of 12 previous monarchs, but none had generated the global attention that today's ceremony was receiving. Inside the cathedral, 2,000 invited guests from around the world sat in carefully arranged sections. Foreign dignitaries, heads of state, religious leaders, and representatives from every sector of Valdorian society filled the ornate pews. But perhaps more significantly, over 2 billion people around the globe were watching through television broadcasts and online streaming services, making this the most watched royal event in history. Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of Valdoria's digital communications team, sat in a small control room adjacent to the cathedral, monitoring the unprecedented social media activity that was unfolding in real time. Multiple large screens displayed feeds from various social platforms, showing a constant stream of posts, photos, and reactions from viewers worldwide. "The engagement numbers are absolutely staggering," she murmured to her assistant, David Rodriguez, who was tracking analytics on his laptop. "We're seeing posting rates that are 10 times higher than any previous royal event, and the sentiment analysis is showing overwhelmingly positive reactions." On her main screen, a world map displayed dots of light representing social media posts about the coronation. The dots appeared so rapidly that entire continents seemed to sparkle with digital activity. For a coronation, Alexander was trending in over 50 countries, and related hashtags like Nas Valdorian Pride and Our New King were generating millions of additional posts. Back in the cathedral, Alexander had just entered through the massive wooden doors, and the gathered congregation rose to their feet. The moment his figure appeared, clearly visible in his magnificent ceremonial robes and carrying himself with quiet dignity, something remarkable happened in the digital world. "Oh my," Dr. Chen said, watching her screens with amazement. "Look at this spike in activity. The exact moment he appeared on camera, posting rates tripled." The comments flooding in were varied but consistently positive. People were praising everything from his composure to his choice of ceremonial dress, but more importantly, they were expressing deep emotional connections to what they were witnessing. A post from Maria Santos in Brazil read, "Watching from São Paulo and crying happy tears. This prince represents everything good about leadership, strength, kindness, and humility, all in one person." Another from James Mitchell in Australia said, "Been following the Valdorian royal family for years, and seeing Prince Alexander today makes me believe in the power of good leadership. The world needs more leaders like this." But perhaps most touching were the posts from citizens of Valdoria itself. Elena Kowalski, a teacher from the northern province, wrote, "My students and I are watching together. This is history, and our future king looks ready to lead us toward better days. So proud to be Valdorian today." As Alexander walked down the long aisle of the cathedral, the ceremony's beauty and solemnity were being shared instantly with the world. Professional photographers captured every angle, but just as significantly, guests were sharing their own perspectives through personal social media accounts. The Archbishop of Valdoria, a gentleman in his 70s named Marcus Brennan, had worked closely with Alexander over the past year to craft a coronation ceremony that honored tradition while speaking to contemporary values. As he began the ancient ceremonial words, Dr. Chen noticed another fascinating trend developing online. People are posting the coronation oath as he speaks it, she told David. They're sharing what the words mean to them, how they interpret the promises he's making. The traditional oath, which Alexander spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried to every corner of the cathedral, included promises to govern with justice, to protect the vulnerable, to preserve the environment, and to serve the people of Valdoria with integrity and compassion. These weren't just ceremonial words to him. They represented genuine commitments he intended to keep. Social media users around the world were responding to the oath with remarkable depth and thoughtfulness. Dr. Emma Williams, a political science professor in Canada, posted, "This coronation oath is a masterclass in servant leadership. Notice how every promise is about what the king will do for others, not what others will do for him." A retired military officer from Valdoria named Colonel Henrik Larsson wrote, "I served under 3 monarchs, and I've never heard a coronation oath that felt so personal and genuine. Prince Alexander means every word he's saying." The most visually striking moment of the ceremony came when Archbishop Brennan lifted the crown of Valdoria, a magnificent piece crafted with gold, sapphires, and diamonds that had been worn by rulers for over 3 centuries. As the ancient crown caught the light streaming through the cathedral's stained glass windows, cameras captured the moment from multiple angles. This was the instant that broke the internet. Dr. Chen watched in fascination as her monitoring systems struggled to keep up with the sudden explosion of social media activity. "David, are you seeing this? We just hit peak engagement. The posting rate is so high that our analytics software is having trouble processing it all." The image of Alexander receiving the crown became an instant global phenomenon. Within minutes, it was being shared, reposted, and commented on by millions of people. But the reactions went far beyond simple appreciation for a beautiful ceremonial moment. Professional photographer and royal watcher Jessica Turner posted from London, "I've covered royal events for 15 years, and I've never seen a coronation moment that captured such perfect combination of majesty and humanity. This photograph will be in history books for centuries." More significantly, people were sharing deeply personal reactions to what the moment represented to them. A young father from Germany named Klaus Weber wrote, "Watching this with my 5-year-old daughter, and she asked why everyone looks so happy. I told her because sometimes the world gets a leader who gives people hope." Celebrity reactions began pouring in as well, but even these focused more on the significance of the moment than on superficial observations. Academy Award-winning actress Catherine Phillips posted, "Witnessing history from Los Angeles. The dignity and grace of this ceremony reminds us what true leadership looks like." But perhaps the most meaningful responses came from ordinary citizens who saw in Alexander's coronation a reflection of their own hopes and values. A nurse from New Zealand named Patricia Wong shared, "Working night shift, but watching on my break. This king represents everything I hope my own children will grow up to value: service to others, environmental responsibility, and genuine kindness." The ceremony continued with traditional elements that had been part of Valdorian coronations for centuries, but Alexander had worked with Archbishop Brennan to include meaningful modernizations. The guest list included representatives from environmental organizations, veterans groups, educational institutions, and community service organizations, reflecting the new king's broad commitment to all sectors of society. When 12-year-old Amara Okafor, a student from an inner-city school who had won a national essay contest about citizenship, stepped forward to read a poem she had written about hope and unity, the social media response was immediate and overwhelmingly emotional. "This is what modern monarchy should look like," posted Dr. Ruth Martinez, a sociology professor in Mexico. "A ceremony that honors tradition while embracing the voices and dreams of all citizens, especially young people who represent the future." The poem itself, which spoke about building bridges between communities and protecting the planet for future generations, was shared thousands of times within minutes. Young people around the world began posting their own poems and messages of hope, creating an impromptu global conversation about leadership and social responsibility. As the formal coronation reached its climax, with Archbishop Brennan officially proclaiming Alexander as King of Valdoria, the cathedral erupted in careful but enthusiastic applause. The moment was simultaneously broadcast to viewing parties in public squares across Valdoria and around the world, creating a shared experience that transcended geographical boundaries. Dr. Chen's monitoring system showed that social media engagement had reached levels that surpassed major sporting events, political elections, and entertainment award shows. But more importantly, the quality of engagement was remarkably positive and substantive. "I've never seen anything like this," David said, looking at his laptop screen filled with analytics data. "Usually, major events generate a lot of shallow reactions and controversy. But look at this. People are writing thoughtful posts about leadership, sharing personal stories about what the monarchy means to them, and expressing genuine optimism about the future." Indeed, the social media conversation had evolved into something much deeper than typical royal event coverage. Parents were posting about watching with their children and discussing the values represented by the ceremony. Veterans were sharing memories of serving their country and expressing confidence in their new king's leadership. Environmental activists were praising the sustainable elements of the event and Alexander's known commitment to climate action. Perhaps most remarkably, citizens of other countries were posting about how the ceremony inspired them to think about leadership in their own nations. A teacher from Japan wrote, "Watching this beautiful ceremony from Tokyo and feeling inspired about the power of principled leadership. The world needs more leaders who understand that power is meant to serve others." As the newly crowned King Alexander walked back down the cathedral aisle, now wearing the crown of Valdoria and carrying the ceremonial scepter, the cameras captured something that would become one of the most shared images in royal history. His expression showed a perfect combination of the weight of responsibility and the joy of service. A man who understood the magnitude of his role, but was genuinely happy to embrace it. The image appeared instantly on millions of screens around the world, and the responses were immediate and heartfelt. A grandmother from Ireland named Bridget O'Sullivan posted, 68 years old, and I've never seen a royal who looked so ready to serve his people with genuine love." A young entrepreneur from South Korea shared, "This is what leadership looks like in the 21st century. Someone who understands that real power comes from serving others and bringing people together." As King Alexander's carriage emerged from the cathedral for the return journey to the palace, the crowds lining the streets erupted in cheers that could be heard for miles. But equally significant were the virtual cheers echoing across social media platforms, where people from every continent were sharing in the celebration and expressing their admiration for what they had witnessed. Dr. Chen sat back in her chair, looking at the multiple screens displaying the ongoing digital celebration. In her years of monitoring royal events and managing the monarchy's online presence, she had never seen anything approaching this level of positive engagement and genuine emotional connection. "This isn't just about a coronation," she said to David. "People are responding to something deeper: hope, optimism, and the belief that good leadership is possible. King Alexander represents values that people around the world are hungry for." As the new king's carriage made its way through the cheering crowds back to the palace, the social media celebration continued to grow and evolve. This was no longer just coverage of a royal event. It had become a global expression of hope for the future and appreciation for leaders who genuinely care about making the world better. The coronation ceremony was complete, but the impact of this remarkable day was just beginning to unfold across social media platforms and in the hearts and minds of people around the world who had witnessed something truly special. The golden afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens as King Alexander stood on the private balcony of his study, still wearing his ceremonial robes, but having set aside the heavy crown for a few precious moments of reflection. The cheers from the crowds gathered in the palace square below had been continuous for hours, but now they had settled into a warm, celebratory hum that carried on the evening breeze. Dr. Sarah Chen knocked softly on the study door before entering with her tablet and a cup of tea. The digital communications expert had been monitoring the global social media response all day, and the numbers she was seeing were unlike anything in the history of royal communications. "Your Majesty," she said, still adjusting to the new title, "I wanted to share some remarkable statistics from today's coverage. The social media engagement has continued to grow even hours after the ceremony ended." Alexander turned from the balcony, his green eyes showing a mix of exhaustion and wonder. The weight of the day, both literally from the ceremonial regalia and figuratively from the responsibility, was settling on his shoulders. "Please, sit down, Sarah, and the numbers can wait a moment. How are you feeling about all of this?" Dr. Chen was struck by this response. Even after the most significant day of his life, the new king's first concern was for the well-being of his staff. "I'm honestly amazed, sir. In 15 years of digital communications work, I've never seen anything that comes close to today's response." She settled into a chair across from his desk and opened her tablet. "The global reach has been extraordinary. We're seeing meaningful engagement from every inhabited continent. But more than the numbers, it's the quality of the responses that's remarkable." On her screen, she showed him a sampling of posts that had been carefully curated by her team throughout the day. A video message from a group of school children in rural Canada who had watched the ceremony together and recorded themselves singing the Valdorian national anthem. A post from an elderly couple in Australia who had been married for 60 years and wrote about how the ceremony reminded them of the importance of commitment and service. A thread from a young woman in Kenya who connected Alexander's environmental initiatives to her own work in sustainable agriculture. "People aren't just watching passively," Dr. Chen explained. "They're connecting the ceremony to their own lives, their own values, their own hopes for the future. It's become a global conversation about leadership, service, and what it means to bring people together." Alexander read through several of the posts on her tablet, his expression growing more thoughtful with each one. A message from a veteran in Texas who wrote about serving in a peacekeeping mission and seeing the importance of leaders who understood sacrifice. A post from a teacher in rural France who described watching with her students and discussing how the coronation represented peaceful transitions of power. A video from a family in India who had gathered 3 generations to watch together, with the grandfather explaining to his grandchildren what true leadership looked like. "Sarah, this is overwhelming in the best possible way," Alexander said quietly, "but it's also terrifying. These people are investing so much hope and trust in me. What if I can't live up to what they're seeing today?" Dr. Chen smiled gently. "Sir, may I show you something else? These posts aren't just about you as an individual. They're about what you represent and the values you've consistently demonstrated over years of public service." She scrolled to a series of posts that had been gaining significant traction throughout the day. Citizens and international observers were sharing memories of Alexander's work before becoming king. Photos from his visits to flood-affected regions, where he had worked alongside emergency responders and volunteers. Videos from his environmental initiatives showing him planting trees with local school children. Images from veterans' hospitals, where he had spent countless hours talking with injured service members and their families. The social media response isn't based on one day or one ceremony, she continued. It's based on years of people watching you demonstrate genuine care for others. Today just gave them a global platform to express what many have felt for a long time. A soft knock interrupted their conversation, and Princess Isabella entered the room. She had changed from her ceremonial gown into a simple blue dress, but she still wore their great-grandmother's tiara, which caught the evening light beautifully. "Brother," she said with a smile, "I wanted to check on you before the evening reception, but I also wanted to share something wonderful that's happening online." She held up her phone, which displayed a social media feed that had been created spontaneously by citizens around the world. Using the hashtag #MyKingMyCountry, people were sharing photos and stories about what Valdoria meant to them. Citizens who had immigrated to other countries were posting about their pride in their homeland. Young Valdorians studying abroad were sharing their excitement about returning to contribute to their country's future. Families were posting photos spanning generations, showing their connection to the monarchy and their hopes for King Alexander's reign. "It's not just about you," Isabella said, echoing Dr. Chen's earlier point. "It's about people feeling connected to something larger than themselves. They're not just celebrating a new king, they're celebrating their identity as Valdorians and their optimism about the future." Alexander looked at the posts on his sister's phone, and his expression shifted from concern to something approaching awe. A young mother had posted a photo of her toddler wearing a tiny replica of the royal colors, with a caption about raising her daughter to value service and kindness. An elderly man had shared a black and white photo from his own military service decades earlier, alongside a message about believing that King Alexander would honor the sacrifices made by previous generations. "The international responses are equally moving," Dr. Chen added, pulling up another section of her analytics. "We're seeing posts from people who have never been to Valdoria, but feel inspired by what they witnessed today. A group of university students in Japan started a discussion thread about modern monarchy and its role in promoting social unity. Environmental groups in multiple countries are sharing information about Valdoria's sustainability initiatives and expressing hope that other nations will follow our example." But perhaps most significantly, the social media conversation had begun to generate real-world action. Dr. Chen showed them posts from volunteer organizations around the world that had seen spikes in new registrations throughout the day, as people inspired by the coronation ceremony decided to increase their own community service. Charitable organizations reported increased donations from people who wanted to honor the new king's example of service to others. "This is extraordinary," Alexander said, setting down Isabella's phone and walking back toward the balcony. "People are turning their inspiration into action. This is exactly what Mother always said the monarchy should be, not just a symbol, but a catalyst for people to be their best selves." From the balcony, he could see that the crowds in the palace square had grown rather than diminished as evening approached. Families had spread blankets on the grass for impromptu picnics. Children were playing games while their parents chatted with neighbors they had just met, and musicians had begun informal performances. The scene looked more like a community festival than a formal royal celebration. "Sir," Dr. Chen said, joining him on the balcony, "there's something else I think you should see. The social media activity is evolving into something we've never witnessed before." She showed him her tablet screen, which displayed real-time posting from the crowd below. People were sharing photos and stories not just of the ceremony, but of the connections they were making with each other. A father posted about his daughter befriending another child in the crowd, and how they had spent the afternoon playing together despite speaking different languages. An elderly woman shared a story about a young couple who had helped her find a comfortable place to sit, and had spent hours talking with her about their shared love for Valdorian history. "The coronation has created a sense of community that extends far beyond the ceremony itself," Dr. Chen explained. People are feeling connected to each other, not just to the monarchy. It's as if today gave them permission to express their shared values and hopes for the future. Isabella pointed to the garden below, where palace staff were beginning to set up tables for an evening reception. Alex, you should know that we've had requests from diplomatic missions around the world asking if they can organize similar community gatherings at their embassies. The coronation has inspired people globally to come together and celebrate the kinds of values you represented today. As if to illustrate her point, Dr. Chen's tablet buzzed with a notification showing a live video feed from the Valdorian Embassy in Washington, D.C., where several hundred people had gathered for an impromptu celebration. Similar scenes were being broadcast from embassies in London, Tokyo, Cairo, and dozens of other cities around the world. People are creating their own celebrations, Alexander observed with wonder. They're not waiting for official events or formal invitations. They're simply coming together because they feel inspired to do so. A gentle chime from Dr. Chen's tablet indicated another significant milestone in the day's social media activity. Your Majesty, we've just reached a remarkable benchmark. The total engagement around today's coronation has exceeded the combined social media activity of the last 3 Olympic Games. And unlike many viral events that generate controversy or division, the sentiment analysis shows an unprecedented 94% positive response rate. But more meaningful than the statistics were the individual stories that continued to emerge throughout the evening. A group of refugees living in Valdoria had posted a video message expressing their gratitude for finding safety in a country led by someone who valued compassion and inclusion. A teacher from a rural school district shared photos of her students' artwork inspired by the ceremony, with children drawing pictures of themselves, serving their communities in various ways. Perhaps most touching was a post from an elderly man named Georg Hansen, who had survived a serious illness the previous year. He wrote, "Watching today's ceremony from my hospital room and feeling more hopeful about the future than I have in months." When you see a young leader who genuinely cares about others, it reminds you that the world can be a good place. As evening fell and the palace staff began preparing for the formal reception, Alexander made a decision that would further solidify his connection with the people who had embraced him so warmly throughout the day. "Sarah," he said, "I want to go down to the square. Not for a formal appearance, but just to thank people for sharing this day with us." Dr. Chen looked concerned. "Sir, that wasn't part of the scheduled events and security protocols." "I understand the concerns," Alexander interrupted gently. "But look at those people down there. They've spent their entire day celebrating not just me, but the values we all share. The least I can do is spend a few minutes thanking them personally." Isabella grinned. "I think it's a wonderful idea, and I suspect the social media response to an impromptu walkabout will be quite something to see." 20 minutes later, King Alexander emerged from a side door of the palace, still wearing his ceremonial robes but having left the crown and scepter inside. The initial reaction from the crowd was surprise, then excitement, then something approaching joyful pandemonium as word spread that their new king had come out to meet them personally. Dr. Chen watched from a palace window as Alexander moved through the crowd, stopping to talk with families, posing for countless photos, and listening to personal stories from citizens who had traveled from across the country to be present for his coronation. Her tablet showed the real-time social media response as people in the crowd began posting photos and videos of their personal interactions with the king. The posts that emerged from these impromptu meetings were deeply personal and moving. A young boy posted a photo of himself with King Alexander, writing, "He asked me what I want to be when I grow up. I said I want to help people like he does. He said he believed I would." A grandmother shared a video of Alexander listening intently as she told him about her late husband's military service and thanking her family for their sacrifice. "You could tell he really heard me," she wrote. This is a king who understands that every citizen has a story worth hearing. But perhaps the most viral moment came when Alexander encountered a young girl in a wheelchair who had traveled from the southern province with her family. He knelt down to speak with her at eye level, and their conversation lasted nearly 10 minutes. Someone in the crowd captured a photo of the moment, and it was shared millions of times within hours, with captions in dozens of languages praising the king's natural compassion and dignity. As the evening progressed and Alexander finally returned to the palace, Dr. Chen compiled the final statistics from what had become the most socially engaged royal event in history. But more importantly, she had witnessed something that transcended digital metrics, a genuine connection between a leader and his people, amplified by technology, but rooted in authentic human values. "Your Majesty," she said as she presented her final report, "today has changed not just how people view the monarchy, but how they view themselves as citizens and community members. The social media response shows that people feel empowered to be part of something larger than themselves." Alexander nodded, settling into his chair as the weight of the day finally caught up with him. "Sarah, I want you to do something for me. I want us to find ways to maintain this sense of connection and community. Today can't just be one beautiful day. It needs to be the beginning of something lasting." Dr. Chen smiled. "Sir, based on what I've seen today, I believe the people are ready to help you build exactly that kind of future." As midnight approached and King Alexander finally retired to his private chambers, the social media celebration continued around the world. Time zones meant that in some countries, people were just waking up to see the coverage from Valdoria, while in others, families were staying up late to share the experience together. The hashtag #Coronation, Alexander, remained the top trending topic globally, but it had evolved into something much broader than coverage of a single event. It had become a rallying point for people who believed in the possibility of compassionate leadership, inclusive communities, and hope for the future. In his final moments before sleep, Alexander checked his personal phone one last time. Among the hundreds of notifications was a simple message from a young father in New Zealand. "Thank you for showing my children what true leadership looks like. Today gave us all hope." As the new king of Valdoria drifted off to sleep, similar messages were being posted by thousands of people around the world who had been touched not just by a beautiful ceremony, but by the possibility of a better future, led by someone who genuinely cared about making the world a better place for everyone.